All right. So first, I want to say thanks, Dan, for your time and coming on the podcast. You're sort of one of the first people when I started reading and listening to podcasts and researching about triathlon that really spoke to me with all your research. And you bring a sort of lightness and sense of humor to it, and also personally pretty accomplished. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's a good, well-rounded approach.
No, yeah,
So
thanks for hunting me down and inviting me on. Took a while to get connected, but at least yeah, here we are.
yeah, absolutely. It's probably better as well. I have a little bit more experience on my side and the better context as well from
Yeah.
some of these ideas, that you share and talk about are a little bit less foreign and a little bit less intellectual and putting the body through the actual experience of it as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's what I always tell all my students that I work with at university, and even in the applied sports science sense. I think one of the main things that I think people get athletes, so practitioners get the most out of is actually doing it yourself. You can't really, it's really hard to understand until you've experienced what a 20, 25, 30-hour training week actually really feels like before you can tell other people how to do it right. So I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even just, a lot of the time I'll see a doctor talking about nutrition or health in some way. And I'm like, this guy doesn't necessarily look very healthy,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
and that happens a lot across the
Yeah.
board. So
Oh, yeah.
seeing yourself, with a PhD, constantly studying this stuff, but then putting up, amazing Ironman times and really doing it yourself,
Mm.
it makes it resonates a lot more authentically.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, with what you said about the doctor, it's so hard because I had an experience the other day where a doctor was asking me about my diet, and he's sat there and he's basically over fat, right? And it's just, yeah, it just doesn't. It is quite hard. I think one of the things that we try and, like, my company Endure IQ, one of the things that we have on our home screen is like there's three reasons why we think that we why people should join Endure IQ. And one of the reasons is that we walk the talk, and we not just talk, just talk about it and not do it. And I think it is something to be said for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where the best experience and knowledge comes from, is that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, just as of now, we've just kind of come through a pretty wild year where sort of a lot of racing was taken off the table. A lot of education places were closed down as well. What sort of is the balance of your focus these days between racing and training and coaching and your IQ and your more sort of lab studies and things like that?
Yeah. So I guess last year, one of the big focuses for me was I was the head of physical performance for Emirates Team New Zealand, which is the America's Cup sailing team. So, and that finished in March. So we weren't actually that affected. Being in New Zealand, we weren't affected that much anyway. But then, because the Emirates Team New Zealand wasn't really affected that much either, so it was kind of, on that front, it was business as usual. I think there was like 2 or 3 weeks for the entire year where I couldn't actually go into the base where we actually were where we actually worked together. So that I wasn't affected. So that was my primary focus, really, just because it's big event, big pinnacle thing that we're aiming towards, and the event went on. And then it was a case of, I always think of this, the balancing counterbalance is what I was very much overbalanced towards the Emirates Team New Zealand side, and then just trying to keep up and do what I needed to do in terms of my own business, students, and that side of things. But now the attention's shifted because that's finished. It finished in March, and thankfully we had a good result. And yeah, so now I'm focusing on Endure IQ, growing that business, my students, and the athletes that I coach, and a few side projects with some other companies as well.
And how about on your own sort of training? And do you have like races on the books coming up, or are you sort of
Um,
backing off from that?
yeah, well, I won't say I'm backing off. I still keep pretty fit. I mean, I still have. I mean, it's impossible to stop me. I always find that, like, when I have structure in my training, I have structure everywhere else. So I always try and follow some structure in training, regardless of whether I've got a race or not. but I'm just trying to toy up with what I actually want to do in terms of if I want to do racing, or I just want to kind of just keep fit and I enjoy training. I enjoy being part of that. Or do I actually want to go for something that's a bit more, a bit more specific and looking for that. So, but I mean, I'm toying with doing a 70.3 maybe in September. I'm also toying with hunting down a fast Ironman, because I've never actually done a course that's on an Ironman on a fast course. So I wouldn't mind perhaps having a crack whilst I'm still young and I'm in my prime to get a good, get as close to 8 hours as I possibly can.
Yeah. How many fast Ironman tracks are there? I mean, it's such a funny relative term, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, most are quite fast. I mean, because for example, I think Ironman Texas is fast, Florida's fast.
Mm.
And there's lots of Challenge. Challenge Roth was notoriously fast, but I don't think it's as fast as it used to be. Ironman Brazil's faster. There are some Ironman Busselton in Australia is quite fast if it's not too hot, at least. So there are definitely some races that are faster than others. You just have to kind of look at, how many of the pros are going under 8 hours. If you've got a lot of the pros going under 8 hours, I think like in one year in Texas, almost the top 10 guys all went under 8 hours, right? So that's clearly a very fast course.
Yeah.
So but I mean, it's all dependent on travel and what I can do as well. We are now open with Australia and New Zealand, so there's potential to have a trip over there and do something with that too.
Yeah. You mentioned being sort of in your prime, and aiming for that 8 hour mark while still being young. It seems like endurance sport, there is a creeping age where you can still continue to improve over a period of time, like as far back as like a Mark Allen, winning at 37, and he's like again for Dino now. Like, how old are you, and where do you see like that end of that sort of potential prime sort of petering out, or do you think it can sort of keep creeping?
I mean, you've got guys like Cameron Brown, who's from New Zealand. It's like 15-time Ironman New Zealand winner, and he's still racing pro, and he's like 47 or 46, 47. Hope I got that right. Otherwise, that's not very good. Sorry, Cameron, if I did. But yeah, so I mean, I think most people can get away with it into their early 40s. I think Cameron's a bit of an exceptional human being in that regard. I mean, and I'm 38, so I think I've definitely got a few more years in me. Like when I won Kona in 2018, the obvious thing for most people thought I was going to turn pro, but in my eyes, it was never really an option. Like I always say that if it happened to me 10 years earlier, I was in, rather than 38, well, at the time I was 37. So if I was 37, rather than I was 27, I would have definitely had a crack at turning pro. But at that point, mortgages, kids, and all that kind of thing, it just didn't seem like a responsible thing to do. So it's always a difficult one for me with that's why I always struggle to know what I want to do, because I feel like I'm kind of done with the racing age group thing, but then I also feel like I am not really at the level to race professionally either, because I'm definitely not professional. I have a very busy work schedule, so I can't, I can only train really 15 hours a week. And to do well, you're required to do a lot more than that. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems like your interests and the way that you spread your work around is so diverse. Do you think it would be almost maybe like mentally detrimental to have such a narrow focus, or do you thrive with more of that diversity with the coaching and the businesses and all that other stuff?
Yeah, I definitely thrive on diversity. Yeah, I love having. I mean, I guess also I could never see. I mean, I've worked in I wouldn't say it's not corporate world, but I've worked for big organizations like High Performance Sport New Zealand and bigger organizations where you're kind of controlled. And yeah, I'm not really a controllable person. So being told, I hate being told what to do. I hate being told I have to be somewhere at a certain time. So that side of things, it works really well for me. I like to organize my own time, do what I want to do as and when I want to do it. And yeah, that's so important to me. And I do wonder, I think, even if I was to say, okay, I'm going to have a crack at doing something special in Ironman, which I'm 100% not going to do, I don't think I'd get rid of everything, right? I'd keep some bits, but I wouldn't work to the level that I am right at this very moment in time.
Yeah.
Which is quite a bit.
So, you mentioned that you like to do what you want with your own time. But then, for a lot of people, especially in this last year, working from home, maybe not having so much structure, part of the reason for me to I think get into triathlon was to introduce more structure, feeling like I was lacking that. Do you find that that's something that you see for yourself? You mentioned in terms of having that being helpful, and the people that you coach being a way that people can sort of take control of their own structure in more of a sort of conscious, positive way, and see that ripple out through the rest of their life?
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to it, like people need structure in one thing at least, right? So like sometimes my work cannot be structured, but if my training is structured, then it kind of makes my work structured. And people often who have very structured work can't really be that structured in the training. So it's quite hard to have two structured things, right? Because then you're trying to get two, it's like a round peg in a square hole sort of thing. It just doesn't really work. But I think it's all, at least you have to have some structure somewhere. And for most, because people don't know how to structure training, the structured training is where people get massive benefits.
The other thing I was, thinking as you're talking there is like, you're 38 and you're, at a great peak fitness state, on the borderline of pro, and obviously, age group record holder. But like, you've been doing it for 20 or 30 years, right? So I'm, part of me is like, oh, I just turned 36 a few days ago, and I'm like, it's inspiring to hear that and see some of these other people doing such amazing things, but I don't have, decades of that sort of engine building as well. And, our culture is very impatient a lot of times. Yeah. So I wonder like how you sort of, with coaching, maybe it's more evident, working with people and being realistic, but also helping them have more of a long-term perspective.
Yeah. Well, and that's a major thing. I think in all the athletes that I coach, I always try to make them look long-term. But everyone wants things in that year, right? And it just doesn't work that way, particularly when you're starting new. It takes years and years to get to where you want to go. I coach a woman who she's just moved to New Zealand, but I started coaching her about 5 or 6 years ago, and I think even for her and even myself to some extent, you overestimate what you can do in a year, but you always underestimate what you can do in 5 to 6 years. And she's just come second overall age group at Ironman New Zealand, and I don't think she would have predicted that 5 or 6 years ago. So that's why I'm going to give you, I think, too short term. You also your limits are not very realistic either. They're often set too low, and just by having good habits, getting in the right routine, doing the right thing day in, day out, the things will focusing on the process, things just generally happen, and you don't have to worry about things too much as long as you can get those bits right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you shared on your Instagram that you'd read Atomic Habits, which is, I think, an amazing book, and it really sort of highlights and talks about just that commitment to the process and each day, doing that little bit, moving along the path. And that perspective, if you can hold on to it, is really beautiful and powerful, but it's still a tricky balance, between the results and just allowing that to unfold.
Yeah, I mean that anyone who hasn't read Atomic Habits, it's one of the most, it's the book that I would recommend the most to nearly every single athlete that wants to achieve something, because it is 100% very, very true. And people, they just see performance and they think, oh wow, isn't that amazing? But they don't realize how many years it's taken for that to happen. Like it's crazy. Like the Jan Fredinos and all these people, all these pros who are winning, that's not just happened in a year. I've been doing it for years and years and years, and that's something that has to be remembered in the long-term approach. Is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think that's part of our like cultures, like the overnight success that took 30 years or 20 years or
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
even, I spoke to Mark Allen the other day, and like, he's so well known for having 6 Ironman Kona championship titles, but it's like he lost 6 times before he ever won, right? And it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
and then you're training years even before that. So
yeah.
um yeah, I think it's something that it's hard to remember a lot of the time, but there's just so much of that work um, that leads up to it. So I wonder, in your own path, you started with triathlon really quite early, as far as from what I know. Were there certain sort of markers in hindsight where you sort of feel like, oh yeah, this sort of unlocked, and then this sort of unlocked, because it's been sort of like a journey to get to where you are.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced both. I've experienced both sides. I think I had not great guidance, and um, I also didn't move up to my strengths when I should have done. Like when I say I should have moved longer a lot earlier in my life. Like I never really tried the long distance until I was till I was over 30. I think 2000. And I think we did my first one in 2000. My first Ironman in 2013. So by that point, I'd been through the British system, Olympic distance, sprint distance, and I think I should have made that jump because I'm so much better at the longer distance than I am at the shorter distance. Like at the shorter distance, I just couldn't run fast enough. Wasn't a fast enough runner. But suddenly, when I went to Ironman, my running went from my weakness to my strength because I could run. Although I wasn't that fast, I could run a long distance quite fast. Funnily enough, so that was kind of. And so that's on that side of things. It was I came through a university. I was a good junior. I was a good youth. But then I lost my way. I don't want to say I lost my way, but I didn't really. I kept on training, but I didn't really focus it on too much when I was doing my master's degree. And then once I'd kind of moved to New Zealand, I met some great people, loads of new great ideas, changed my diet, which was a major thing that I did was basically revolutionary for me. And then I just kind of stepping up. And my first Ironman was a 9:21 in 2013, and by 2018 it was 8:24. So in Kona, which is probably equivalent of a low 8 hours in any other kind of race.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, you mentioned the diet, and that's obviously, a part of Endure IQ and a lot of the information that you've shared, the sort of how to properly do a low carbohydrate diet for endurance. I assume maybe that's some of what you experienced in terms of that revolutionary change. Maybe you can share a little bit about that, because I feel like, it's such a key part of healthy living, but then when you pepper in something like an Ironman and the training that goes into that, it's so crucial.
Yeah. Well, even to take a step back, I said that misinformed. I remember when I first went to my university at Liverpool University, I kind of stepped out from being a youth and I was a junior, and it was the first time I was um, into like the British system, so to speak. So we had access to coaches and nutritionists, and at the time the nutritionists, they just gave terrible advice, absolutely terrible advice, like eating cereal, have cereals as your snack. You shouldn't ever be left without a water bottle with sports drink in your hand. And funnily enough, I got to university and my performance just went downhill from being a really good youth and young junior to just everything just fell apart, and I struggled to recover. I struggled to get to appropriate race weight, and it was mainly just because I was just had bad advice and I was eating too many carbs, and basically that unrailed me as a junior. And I never went to the at the time I did represent the country as a junior, but I never made it as under 23. And then that was kind of the end of it. And then I went to do my master's, which was at Leeds at the time, where I was helping. I was assistant coach with Johnny Brownlee and Alistair Brownlee, who are the Alistair's double Olympic gold medalist. And then I moved to Singapore, and then I'm kind of finding my way. And then it wasn't until I moved to New Zealand where Tim Noakes started talking about the low carb diet. So when he normally talks, I wake up and I pay attention. So that was in about 2012. I started experimenting with it, made a lot of mistakes along the way until I finally kind of understood about how to approach variations of it properly for specifically for long distance triathlon. And through all that titrating and learning, it just transformed my training, it transformed my performance, and I could recover better. I wasn't hitting the wall. I wasn't getting any gastrointestinal distresses. I was maintaining a much leaner weight all year round. And all my training just went through the roof pretty much. And that's why, we built LDT. Endure IQ, we have a course on it, LDT 101. And it's because of the reason is that one is it's sad that people often get the wrong nutritional message. And also, I don't want people to have to wait 4 or 5 years of experimenting on themselves to get it right. And so that's why I built out of like LDT 101 out of necessity, because there's only really so many one-on-ones I can do with people. So I kind of just built that course. And now we've had 720 people through that course. And and we've had a lot of great success, and just nothing but praise and changing people's health and performance.
Yeah, that's great. And there's obviously, these days I feel like there's just so many dogmatic diets out there, and especially in our like Western culture, people seem to like go for that stuff. It's as like the silver bullet to any sort of weight loss or healing or performance. And so I'm curious to know, like, through your experiment process and sort of, the low carbohydrate diet that you talk about versus something like a ketogenic diet, what are some of the like key pieces in there that you've discovered that seem to be helpful for some majority of people?
Well, lowering carbohydrates generally is better for most people in terms of, well, okay, I'll go back a little bit. The main thing that we try and achieve through the diet is increasing your fat metabolism. If you think one of the predeterminants of success in long distance triathlon is preserving what we call endogenous, so your internal carbohydrate stores. So if you think about your running at say 4-minute Ks, if like you're running at 4-minute Ks, but 98% of your energy is coming from carbohydrates, no matter how much you're taking in, there's only a matter of time before you basically hit the wall and you run out of it. So if you can make a shift where you're actually shifting it to where 30% of your energy is coming from carbohydrates and the rest is coming from fat, then you're preserving those endogenous carbohydrate stores. And that's kind of the thing that you're trying to shift. And that's why often people, the word bonking, hitting the wall, that's often why that happens. But and that's where ketogenic diets often claim, and they do increase fat metabolism. But it's kind of this, in terms of recovery and high-end performance, there's always it's a little bit gray in that end. I mean, the pure ketogenics will tell you that they'll say that ketogenic diet doesn't have any effect on your high-end performance. But what I've found is that it's more low carb in between. So we talk about ketogenic being around less than 50 grams per day, whereas what I've found is for most people it's around 130 grams per day. But I also don't say that that's the same for everyone. We use a variety of measures where the process is that we do 3 weeks where you actually specifically are ketogenic, where you're really trying to push your fat metabolism. Then after that, you do a phase where you add in more carbohydrate to find the appropriate level for you. And in doing that, you're measuring your performance, your heart rate variability, your blood glucose levels, and finding what's right for you. So it's not ketogenic, because people often get too obsessed with ketones and measuring the ketones all the time. They're restricting this, they fasting, so then you suddenly got negative energy balance, and that's where the problems really come. And also they're often restricting protein because they believe like gluconeogenesis and making carbohydrates from protein is a problem. So there's all these little bits that of the puzzle that really make a difference to how you come out the other end. Because as you could make some massive, if you did too much fasting, you were obsessed with being in ketosis and you were keeping your carbohydrates too low, you're also avoiding protein. I mean, those 3 things alone, if you're trying to train 10 to 15 hours a week, it's not going to end well. And I mean, for me to sit there and say that, everyone will be, yeah, that's obvious, but believe me, everyone does that. So
Yeah.
so they're the kind of some of the things that I kind of eke out in the course, and our guidelines are based more around how you can work that within an athlete. And importantly, doing it that way has more longevity. It's actually really easy to maintain a carbohydrate level between 130 to 150 grams per day. It is not easy to keep it less than 50.
Yeah.
You're talking less than 50 is really hard, really restrictive. People don't manage it for a very long time. Whereas when it's around 130, 150, you can, I've been doing it since 2012, and it's just part of the way I live. It's so easy for me. And it's so easy for all the people that I've helped. It's not a diet, it's just a lifestyle that you're continuously in.
Right. And so like 100 to 130 grams of carbs, like you're saying, that would be sort of opposed to more in the range of like 400 or 500 that somebody might be eating who's training without any thinking about that, maybe, or if they're trying to eat a lot of carbs.
Yeah, well, I think sports nutrition guidelines are about 500 to 600 grams per day for an athlete. And, that's like about 3 loaves of bread or something insane like that. And, there's two sides to it. Yeah, athletes can do that and have little effect on the performance, particularly if they're quite, they're good at dealing with carbs. And, but you got to think about what that's doing long term to your health and what that's doing to your blood glucose and how that's fluctuating throughout the day. So there's more to it than just performance in my eyes. And one of the major things, and I think it's really sad, and why at Endure IQ our motto is performance, health, and enjoyment, is that people do triathlon because they want to have a healthier lifestyle. And 9 times out of 10, they go the opposite direction because they do too much high intensity training. They have too much processed food, too much sugar. They get overly stressed. So the sympathetic system's just heightened, and then everything just goes downhill. And as a result of that, they're not enjoying it either. So you go down one thing because it's something you enjoy, because you want to be healthier. And then at the end of it, because they've had often poor guidance and poor put a poor method in place, they can go the opposite direction.
And do you find that that's more so like the age groupers and amateurs that are getting like way off base with diet and training versus elite?
Yeah, it is definitely and namely because the more you train, the more you're throwing into the furnace, the more you can deal with it. But often age groupers have it worse because they're not training as much. They have stress at work. They generally, because of that, they're getting less sleep because they have to do all their training between the hours of 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. And all these things have a really negative impact on the health. And we've just published, and even on that side of fat, just looking at fat metabolism in general, we're just looking at some data from our lab where we're seeing that training age is a massive predictor of how good your fat metabolism is. So if you have been training for a very, very long period of time, generally your fat metabolism is a lot better, which is very helpful for long distance triathlon. So if you're an age grouper who is new to the sport, they've not been doing endurance sports for very long, you won't simply get a good fat metabolism just by ignoring it. There's definitely something that you have to do to improve it if you want to do well in long distance triathlon. However, if you've been doing endurance sports for a very long period of time, then you might, from a fat adaptation perspective, it's probably not something you have to be as conscious of as someone who's more new to the sport. And and actually, I was just reading a paper that we're just about to send to European Journal of Applied Physiology, and it looked at something called it's called CD36, which looks at fatty acid transportations, and you take it from the muscle, you take it from the vastus lateralis in the leg, and it's very linked to high levels of peak fat oxidation. And what we showed is this enzyme was really related again to 30-minute time trial performance. And if we modeled it with threshold values, VO2 max, and we put that into the model, it would predict performance very, very well. So it clearly is, having a high peak fat oxidation is definitely something that an athlete wants to think about as much as they are thinking about what their threshold is, what their FTP is, what their aerobic threshold is, what their VO2 max is, this is just another determinant of performance for long distance triathlon. And it's something that needs to be addressed with the right training and diet.
Mhm. So if somebody's gonna like step into this and do maybe that 3 week period of more of a ketogenic um, period, would training be lesser during that time, or would you be able to continue training as normal?
Yeah, you definitely reduce your training quite a lot, because you don't want to you don't want to throw too many variables into one equation, right? If you're like training hard and training and reducing your carbs, it's quite a shock to the system. So I mean, the general approach is you reduce your training, but you just keep a couple of higher intensity sessions per week. It's just through my own experience and working with a lot of athletes now who've gone through the whole process. Just keeping a little bit of high end during that process helps you with the high end on the other side. It just keeps some of those enzymes that are responsible for anaerobic glycolysis pumped up a little bit and stimulated. So you don't lose that top end really when you come out the other side of it. Whereas most people, they go into the low carb and they kind of just only do low intensity. That's generally a mistake. Reducing your volume, low intensity, but a couple of high intensity sessions in the week is generally what's found to be best.
Okay. So for me, I guess, I've kind of been in this sort of not fully keto, in and out of it, but gotten into like intermittent fasting. And now I'm, getting into more training and realizing, well, I probably need to eat something earlier in the day. So I've got some more fuel as I go into workouts, and shouldn't be doing every single workout fasted. But it's like a funny psychological like shift to eat breakfast again.
Yeah.
I wonder, from your perspective and what you've seen work for breakfasts that work in that sort of approach diet wise that support some training. Are there certain foods or things that you see helping that maybe don't make people feel too like heavy, but give them enough fuel to sustain the workouts?
Yeah, I think what you're saying there, like doing all your fasted training, it's a mistake that a lot of athletes make. People get obsessed with doing fasted training for some reason. I do think that you got to consider that if you're not eating and you're just having water or electrolytes in your bottle, and you're not finishing training, you're doing a long session, you don't finish till sometimes 10 o'clock in the morning. It's almost impossible to catch that back up. And if you do that too many times, you're going to have negative energy balance. You could have reduced energy deficiency, and then a whole host of endocrine problems, right? And for males, usually that manifests in lower testosterone and sometimes problems with bone density. So it's definitely something that if you're training if you're training a lot, then don't bother. But I do think intermittent fasting is a really good thing for people who aren't doing a lot of exercise, who are typically doing just like 30 minutes a day, then it can be a good thing. But on the question about what you should eat before, depends what you're trying to achieve. Whether you're into a lower carb diet or not, the type of what you eat before can often affect the outcome and the training adaptation that comes from that training session. I've got a PhD student who's actually answering that very question. It's basically, what should I eat before exercise? And yeah, so if you are doing in an endurance session, we've actually just published a study that was published in Nutrients that showed that basically, if you're looking at fat metabolism, if you eating just being fasted or eating just protein has very similar effects on your fat metabolism. So you actually won't really blunt your fat metabolism based on those two things, which is good for athletes, because if fat metabolism is something that you're concerned about with training, you can have protein and you get some energy, and it wouldn't really affect you. So if your stomach can take it, a protein breakfast is often a protein only and a bit of fat breakfast can be a really good thing. When we had a lot of carbohydrates, fat metabolism was really, really reduced a lot, and that was substantial or significant. So, but then again, but at the same time, at the back end of that, there was a performance trial. So you had to do you did 6 3 minutes. The first 3 were at your ventilatory threshold 2. So like like FTP, as most people would know it as. And then the next three were maximal. So you had to do as much power as you possibly can over the 3 minutes. And whether you were fasted, you had protein, or you had carbohydrates, there was also no difference. So it doesn't actually matter that much what you eat, but it is also depending on the exercise. So I think we don't really know where the breaking point is, but where you're getting towards a session that is longer and highly dependent on carbohydrates. So I always think of a session like a 70.3 type session where you're riding for 2 hours at close to your 70.3 power. That would probably require you to have a little bit of carb just before, but it wouldn't be, not too much. You don't have to go and shovel like 250, 300 grams. You can probably just get away with, 50 or 60.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you kind of mentioned, heart rate training as well, and that's been something that you've studied pretty extensively. Again, with like age group athletes and myself and my own experience, it's something I've really tried to embrace, and have seen some good results in my first few months of diving into it and really sort of trying to honor the heart rate. But I wonder how much you see people that don't have access to really high-end testing, either setting their thresholds too high or drifting outside of them and not working out at a low enough intensity.
Yeah, I mean, most it doesn't happen that much in pros. Like pros generally don't do it regardless. Even if they're not wearing a heart monitor, they'll generally train a lot easier. But I think it's largely because they can actually, the faster you are, the faster you move, even at a low heart rate. And one of the problems with age groupers and amateurs is that it feels bad to go too slow, and and the heart, and often to get that heart rate low, it feels almost embarrassingly slow, for want of a better word. So they end up not doing it, but it doesn't mean to say that there's not huge benefits from doing it. And so it's definitely more of a mistake in the amateurs, with the idea is that for anything that's endurance based, you do want to keep your heart rate below that first ventilatory threshold. But as you say, the problem is ascertaining and getting an idea of where that threshold value actually is. And it's not that easy to do unless you go to a lab to get to actually measure it properly. But there's just actually come out a new app called HRV Logger that was produced by Marco Altini, and he uses the DFA1 method that looks at basically the correlations between heart rate variability. So it looks from one beat to the next beat. And you can actually now use that to get an idea of where your threshold heart rate is. So people are interested in knowing where that aerobic threshold heart rate is, you should have a look at that app. I actually tested it yesterday because I was in the lab doing, often because you try working at a university with a load of students and be an athlete yourself, you get roped into being the subject for just about every single. If I just did studies, I'd be very fit, put it that way, because there's always something going on. But yeah, I actually tested it yesterday. So I did a VO2 max test with lactate, and I plugged it into the DFA A1 method at the same time, and it came out pretty much spot on to what the ventilatory thresholds were picking as well. So it's really important to pick that. So then when you're doing your endurance training, I always suggest that use heart rate as your guide for anything that's endurance based, but then use pace and power for anything that's kind of more tempo and threshold based, because it's just generally a better metric to get an idea of what the stress is, because you don't want to, if you use power or pace at a lower intensity, just because of what that stress that's going on through the cardiac drift that's going on through an exercise. If you do 3 hours, you could well be above your be above your aerobic threshold by the end, and therefore be making it too hard.
Yeah, it seems like in terms of like doing the majority of the low intensity stuff, if you've got a certain pace, that's not going to take into account of like a bad sleep, or if it's hotter out, like all of those other like stressors internally and externally, which is what the heart rate based training seems like a really good thing for, is because it really brings all of that into it.
Yeah, it's a measure of overall physiological stress. And And some people will actually, I've heard some physiologists and coaches use it as a negative. You know, they say, "Oh, you can't use heart rate; it's too affected by heat and altitude." I'm like, well, that's a good thing. Like that's why you should use heart rate.
Yeah.
So even like dehydration, all those things are affect your heart rate, right? So that's why it can be such a good measure. So.
Yeah. Well, on the topic of hydration, that's from all the like websites and articles and podcasts and things I've listened to, like hydration is not something that's probably the sexiest to talk about, or maybe it's been dialed for long enough. I don't know. But like, what are your thoughts around hydration, like for a day of living and with training involved?
It's really simple. If you're thirsty,
Yeah.
have a drink. that's about as far as it goes, really.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, there's nothing complicated about it, but industry's made it really complicated, and drinking to your losses of body weight and all that. But yeah, I don't buy any of it. Yeah, unfortunately, and all the like, people walking around and with water bottles, and it's kind of the fashion to have a water bottle in one hand and a mobile phone in the other. Yeah, that's pretty much as far as it goes. So I haven't really got much to say on that. We are designed as Homo sapiens to lose body weight through exercise, and that's how we evolved, and that's what makes us so good at running and cycling long distances. So that's about it. It's important to. The research shows that it's really important to arrive at your training hydrated. But if you're, as long as you have water available, you'll always be hydrated. The most important thing is always have fluids available to you and don't be without them. Like I'm sat here now and I've got some water right next to me, and I'll drink that as and when I want it, right? And as long as you follow those simple guidelines, you're pretty sweet.
Right. So don't go out on like a 4-hour bike ride fasted with no water.
No, exactly. That's something though you shouldn't do. There's no benefit in becoming dehydrated, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So no water fasting. With this sort of tracking, heart rate, sleep, there's so much technology evolving and coming to market around these things. I'm curious to know if you've sort of had access to things in your lab work the last few years, and then sort of what you find the most useful combination of them now.
Yeah, well, my PhD was in heart rate variability, which is, that is a wearable tracker that's very popular. It's become massively popular since I finished my PhD. In terms of topics to choose, I chose a bloody good one. I can tell you that much, because it just kind of skyrocketed after I completed a load of studies on it, which was really good. HRV is something that I take every day, and I make sure my athletes take it every day. Generally, I use a combination. I kind of use the Whoop app, but I also use HRV for training as well. I do both of them just because I'm just a bit of a data geek, and I like to see them both. The HRV for training, they have a coaching app which is quite in line with my methods that I use for my PhD. So I do like to use that, but then at the same time, I like Whoop's good because everything's kind of in one place. You have the HRV, your sleep, and it also tracks some of your daily strain, your daily load. So I do like that. But I think if you're getting your HRV and your sleep, they're the two main things that you can collect every day. And you can have some subjective measures are also really great if you can get your athletes to do them. But so often athletes just don't bother. So that's the good thing about the Whoop is you just wear it, and that's that. Even with HRV for training, it's a great app, super accurate. But obviously, you have to depend on athlete compliance. Whereas I've worked with things like the Whoop or the Oura Ring, you just wear it, and that's that. Then you don't have to think about it anymore, which is obviously great benefits. And compliance is huge. Right? If they're not going to collect the data, then they're not going to collect the data. So.
Yeah, well, I guess you got to collect it, then you've got to actually look at it and then make some choices informed by it.
Yeah.
With your coaching, are you looking at like HRV data from athletes?
Yeah, I do all the time. But I don't really make day-to-day decisions on it. I make more chronic decisions. So if if an athlete is presenting bad on a day, I won't really adjust training unless there's a few other things going on at the same time. So if I see a low HRV value and the subjectives are low and they slept badly and there's a lot of things going on and they're low motivation to train, and then I might adjust the training on that day. But I generally use it to insert recovery periods. So when HRV is not going in the direction that I want it to go, I'll put some recovery in. So I never ever schedule recovery periods ever. I only put recovery periods in based on what the athlete's doing, because it just seems absolutely ridiculous. Because most coaches do this, and they're like, okay, we're going to have 3 weeks hard, 1 week easy, 3 weeks hard, 1 week easy, and then by the end of the second week they're absolutely wrecked. And then they go, we're going to go to the end of this period anyway. But you can in fact, what I tend to do is I'll insert a shorter recovery period during that phase, and then get them straight back into it. And it can also often go the opposite way. I had this with one of the pro Ironman's athletes that I work with. He came to the end of kind of this block, and he was just going so well. He was feeling good. Everything was looking good in terms of his physiology and his HRV. And we just did another week. At the end of that week, he was pretty cooked, but then we took a recovery period. So you don't, it goes both ways. You can use it to do a bit more, you can use it a bit less. But the most important thing is you listen to the physiology and don't just have recovery just because for the sake of having recovery,
Right. Yeah. I guess that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it involves being a lot more sort of in tune with yourself. Obviously having the data through a ring or Whoop or something like that on the sleep is helpful. And do you really encourage athletes to sort of try to get more in tune with themselves and make those decisions for themselves as they go, and they can feel that the energy sort of up and down?
Yeah, I mean, I think athletes intuitively know anyway. And HRV isn't the silver bullet either. So I think it's always a holistic approach to athlete monitoring. You're not just depending on one thing. So often the athlete will first talk to me and say, hey, I did this session like yesterday, I couldn't finish it, I'm not feeling that great. And then you'll look at some data. And the more experienced an athlete is, often be telling you before you even look at it. But 9 times out of 10, it's really good because, and it builds a lot of confidence and trust with the athletes that I work with, in that they'll be feeling that way, and I'll contact them to say, hey, I've seen this, how are you feeling? And then that's really good because they know at least that I can pick up on things without me even seeing them. Or I can say, hey, are you okay? I was just looking at this, it's not looking right. And say, yeah, I've been feeling a bit down. And then, that's just a confirmation that you can make an adjustment with the training. So, but I mean, communication is everything, right? It's all about the communication between athlete and coach to make any kind of decision.
Yeah, well, I think that's such a good point because, as an individual, if I'm just on an island doing my training and having a sort of down day with no outside eyes or care, it could be easy to be like, well, whatever, I'm just going to like have another coffee and go get the workout done or something like that. But you being able to sort of see that and validate their current state for themselves, I think it just like shows in some ways how important having a coach or a mentor or a guide, somebody along this journey. You mentioned early on you had a bit of a lack of good guidance, but now sort of with the experience you have, the coaching that you're doing, how important do you think that is for an elite athlete or for an age grouper?
Yeah, I also think that no matter how much everyone benefits from having a mentor or a coach. I mean, I myself have a mentor, and yeah, I know a lot of stuff, right? But I think you only know what you know, and you often can't see the wood through the trees. When you're in the middle of it, you can't really see out of it. And people are often guilty with doing what they want to do rather than what they should do. Of course, who's gonna? You always go towards the sessions that, one is you're good at, and two is you enjoy doing a little bit more. You're never going to go and do like the 8x1Ks on the track without someone really telling you to do it often, So I think it's both ways. I mean, a coach can obviously hold you back when they need to, but more than that is they get you to do the right things at the right time and push you a little bit more. Because most of the time, people don't realize what their limits are, and they don't realize how tired you should be and how much you should be pushing. Because yeah, like, I mean, that's with my experience working with coaches and mentors, is that, in fact, 95% of the time, more than that, it's been the case that they've been pushing you through rather than holding you back. And I think that's equally as important.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I went for a running analysis today, and part of that was like strength tests, and where I'm doing like as much as I can on like a leg extension and a hip extension and things like that. And after, I was just thinking, like, it's so rare that I ever do anything as hard as I possibly can, even for 5 or 10 seconds. And I feel like, in our culture and the world at large, like, unless you're really like pushing yourself in sport most of the time, we're not usually in that place. And having that coach to push you beyond what you think your limits are seems almost necessary, because it's so hard to do that for ourselves.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, you always come out the other side of it and you're better. I mean, I always remember when I was training fully, we always had we had a half Ironman that's in January, and then Ironman New Zealand's early March. So it'd always be quite a peak training time, and I just remember every year I was cursing my coach at the time, because he would give me quite a lot of training leading into it. I wouldn't have much rest. I'd have always an average race, and then I'd finish that race on 70.3 on the Saturday, and I'd be going pretty hard by the Wednesday. And I just remember that period I was grumpy, I was tired, but by the time, but it's looking back now, it was just such a critical period, because in the long scheme, by the time I got to Ironman New Zealand, I'd done that work and I've been through that period, and it was really good. And if that was me doing it myself, I would never have pushed through that way. I would have taken some rest and I would make sure I was right. And yeah, so.
And do you find, like, from your experience, do you get that more from a coach that's got a little bit different perspective, or having training partners as well?
I mean, both really. I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I trained a lot with Lorenzo Bizzoni. He's, I don't know if you know who he is, but yeah, former world 70.3 champion. I think he's won. I don't know if this still holds true, but I know there was a time not long ago where he'd won more 70.3s than any other professional male in the world. So it's pretty pretty handy. So like, like there's both sides. So the coach and the training partners both play critical roles. I mean, I just know through training with Lorenzo, it's every session's on, right? It's never off. It's just always like, you've always got to bring your A game to the session. Even if you did like, a session that we might do in the build to an Ironman was like 4x40 minutes with 20 minutes in between. And even that 20 minutes, he was still like, we're still clipping along. Like, the difference is we go from 40 k's an hour to 35 k's an hour. So, it's like, but these are things that just build you up when you support. Surround yourself with quality people, and they'll pull you up.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like that. I mean, looking at sports across the board, like, anyone who sort of breaks through to that next level is sort of inspired and pushed by the people ahead of them. And yeah, it's making me feel like I need to make more of an effort to find that, because for the most part, it's been like a lot of solo training, and it can be tough, especially with those like hard workouts or track runs and things like that, to motivate yourself to really see what you can do.
Yeah, well, like for 2018, like me and Lorenzo, we trained together for pretty much the whole year. And then he it's like July, he had a really bad bike crash, and that kind of derailed him a little bit. But he did get back on the wagon, but he never made it to Kona. But I still think that period of having him as a training partner was absolutely paramount, and it builds confidence. If you know that they can do certain things, and you're somewhat keeping up with them, it can be really, really good for your confidence, right? So
Absolutely. You mentioned, his bad bike crash, and before we started recording, I mentioned I recently had my first crash. I wonder, how do you approach injury in general? Getting over that, sort of accepting the reality of it, and then moving forward. Is that something you've had to deal with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, that's the best thing about doing triathlon, though, is there's always something else you can be doing, right? Because it's not very often that you can't swim, bike, or run. Right? Generally, you're knocked off. Generally, most people are knocked off with running, right? They can't run for some reason or another. But yeah, every misfortune always presents an opportunity, and if you do get injured, I think it's a great opportunity to either focus on your strengths, like focus on your weakness and do something in that regard, like do more of your running, you can do more biking, focus on your technique in the pool, or you can even just do some basic strength and conditioning like core work and mobility, because you freed up a lot of time, so you can actually start using it to your advantage. When I remember in 2018, I got a stress fracture in my sacrum, so I was off running for, I think it was close to 6 weeks, but in hindsight, my cycling just lifted, and
Mm.
and then in my running was never affected in the end, but my cycling definitely got better. So yeah, I think it may have been a blessing in disguise to some extent.
As you sort of got into some of the longer distances, was there like one of the three sports that was weaker for you or that felt like noticeably
Yeah,
weaker?
I mean, swimming's always been weaker for me, unfortunately. I mean, I just don't have. I swam since I was I swam since I was young, but I was never really given a lot of good advice around swimming technique. So my swimming technique's not as good as it needs to be for what my biking and running, is really. So that's all. I mean, I mean, for by age group standards, I'm a pretty good swimmer, but like by pro standards, I'd be way off the back. Whereas I could hold my own to some extent on the bike and the run a little bit. Like when I train with Terenzo, for example, there's no chance I'm keeping up with him in the pool. He's just like whapping me all over the place. So yeah.
Yeah. What do you find for people who come to swimming late, like especially myself? Are there some key tips that you might start with? Is it like get straight into like the technique and drills and find a good
Yeah.
coach?
Yeah. I mean, there's technique and drills, but I think people coming to swimming late, it's about being comfortable in the water is really, really important,
Mm.
especially when it comes to open water, because if you're not comfortable, if you have a crappy technique and you're slow, but you're comfortable in the water and being around people, that's really important. Because if you're fast and you're a good swimmer, but you're really nervous and uncomfortable around people, you will waste so much energy, and then it just transcends into the rest of your race. So the main thing is just to be confident and comfortable in the water and do all the things that you can to achieve that. Because if you can get through like I said to you before the start, the swim
Mhm.
is basically, it's such a small part of the race. And I always like to think it's just compulsory transport to the start of the race where the real fun begins. So if you can, if you can get through the swim as effortlessly as possible, even if you're not a fast swimmer and you're not expending too much energy and you're not too nervous, and that's really, really key.
Right. And you mentioned briefly like strength training if you get injured, but is that something that you integrated into your general training later, or have you had that a part of the puzzle for a while?
Yeah, I've actually not really done much strength training my whole life. I've done a lot of specific strength work, like paddles and a lot of paddles in the pool, a lot of
Right.
big gear work and hills on the bike, hilly running. I
Right.
mean, I live in a very hilly area, so whenever I run, it's always there's always a lot of hills to take care of. But I have actually started getting into a bit more strength training more recently. So I've been doing like a functional circuit twice a week, and I've been finding it's been really good. I mean, I do it with my wife, so we kind of just have set up a circuit in the garage, and we've got some kettlebells and lots of different equipment that we just kind of do 45 minutes worth. And I've been really enjoying it. And yeah, I have to say, I'm not doing it for performance. I'm just doing it more just for health and well-being, because it's
Yeah.
important to keep strong as you get older, mobile. And I've definitely found differences in my day-to-day life, even where it's just like picking up the kids and doing general tasks, just because I'm a little bit stronger. And
Mhm.
it's amazed me how much stronger I've actually got. Like I did when I started, I was doing like you can do with the kettlebell, you can do the overhead like a clean and jerk with a single arm, where you like lift it up to your shoulder and then you lift it over your head. when I first started, I could barely lift 16 kilos over my head, and now I can, I can do 24 kilos with a single arm. So it's big improvements. I mean, people laugh at that and they'll be like, "That's pretty weak," but progress.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's still substantial. But yeah, I think it does seem like one of those things that just like across the board for health and fitness for life as we get older, like having that strength training in there is pretty
Yeah.
key.
And you don't have to be, like bench pressing 150 kilos, right? You just
Yeah.
have to be, just keeping up that general strength is really important. When I was with the thing that really made me do it was I kind of had a realization as to just how weak I was, like from a functional strength point when I started working at Emirates Team New Zealand. The grinders, obviously, strength's a huge component of what they do on the boat, and just seeing the difference between what they could do and what I could do. Obviously, I'm never going to be as strong as them, but the difference was so much. I was like, should probably get and do a few weights. So now I've been really enjoying it, and I've been really consistent with it. So that's been good.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm curious to talk a little bit about like mindset. I think there's a certain amount of mindset and mental health, to go into just training for a race, but if you're out on a course for 8, 9, 10 hours, like that is a lot of time to be alone with yourself, more or less, at least like in your mind. So I wonder, do you have practices, be it meditation, journaling, um, things like that, or is all just kind of like what in the training that you're sort of applying?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is in the training. I mean, training in itself is quite meditative. No, is meditative a word?
I think
Maybe.
so. I mean, it can be, right, but it can also be like torturous.
Yeah, but I think whether it's torturous or not, you're still thinking about what's going on in that moment. You're thinking about how much it's hurting or what, but I think there's a lot to that. I have tried so many times with actual meditation, but I just don't really last that long, and it's something that I do want to do more of. I'm actually just having a sauna built at my house. So maybe that's going to be something that I'll get into when I'm in the sauna a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I've also recently started doing like a bit more some breathing exercises before I go to sleep and stuff. But yeah, I think the main thing is that you just focusing on the process and not think. The main thing is for anyone doing long distance triathlon is not to think about how far they've got to go or what's in front. That's why that mindset and meditative state where you're actually thinking about what's happening right here and right now, whether that's being your running gait, your cycling technique, your nutrition, your position on the bike, how relaxed you are when you're running, what your heart rate is at that time, what your pace is at that time. But as soon as you start thinking, hang on a minute, I'm only halfway through here, we're going to do that again. As soon as you have that thought, then it becomes a lot harder. And that's why most people, so this is a fact at Kona, the biggest, where people DNF the most is at the bottom of Palani Hill. So if people who don't know, basically the run's made up of two halves. You run out along a Leahy Drive, and you run out and back, and that's pretty much 20K. Then you run out to the Energy Lab and back, and that's pretty much 20K. So people always get to the bottom of Palani Hill. It's halfway. They're running up that hill. It's at one of the hottest points of the race, and then they'll think, "Wow, I'm really hot, and I'm only halfway." And then it's like, yeah, game over. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what was your first experience like running there or doing that race?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've only raced there twice. I raced once in 2015 and then in 2018, and you cannot, no matter what anyone tells you, you don't know how, you can't put it into words how hot and hard it is. Like 2015 in particular, it was a very hot year, and everyone says every year is a hot year, but yeah. This was you can see all the run times were actually a lot slower that year as well because it was so hot, and I couldn't. Yeah, I felt like I was falling. I ended up running 3 hours and 8 minutes for the marathon, but I felt like it was about 4 hours, 8 minutes at the time. Yeah. And it's just, it's somewhere where I mean, and that's a lot of the mindset. Like if you've done it, once you've been there once and you can start preparing in your mind as to what it is actually like, it definitely helps. Whereas no matter what people tell you, you, yeah,
And
you
no.
can't appreciate it. Yeah.
And like in that first time there, and it's a hot year and like a tough race. I mean, you still ran a pretty impressive time. But during that, are you like, I'm never going to do this again? Does that sort of thought ever cross your mind?
No, it didn't. It didn't actually. When I actually crossed the line, my initial thought was that I could win the age group here. That's what I really thought. I had that conversation with my dad about an hour later, because I saw what the winners did and I knew what I was capable of in my prep. And yeah, so and from that point on, it was kind of a 3-year project to try and do that. So I didn't really think that. I remember after my first Ironman, I found that really hard, and I did think, wow, this is no joke. But I've been really fortunate that I've never really had a super bad day, because even when I went to Kona in 2015, I was still pretty good in the last 10K. I kind of had a bit, and it was just all in the mind, right? Because between 20 and 30K, I was just fighting with demons and I slowed down a lot. But then I got to 10K to go and I actually realized, hang on, stop being so soft. And I picked myself up and I ran the last 10K pretty quick. I think I ran nearly close to 40 minutes for the last 10K. So I made up a lot of time. Yeah. So I've been fortunate that I've never really had a truly bad experience. So
Yeah.
maybe I just don't try hard enough.
Well, I feel like that's a funny thing with like Ironman, especially, is like you're pushing yourself for such a long period of time. It's not like a race in a normal sense. It's like, I think I read somewhere, I heard someone say like it's about who can slow down the least, sort of thing, rather than like who can do it the fastest. But yeah, I think like, yeah, just doing and yeah, I don't know.
That would be, I mean, the idea of who can slow down the least would be a very bad way to go about doing things, that's for sure. Because otherwise you go out very fast. Whoever said that has given very, very bad advice.
Yeah.
It holds true for events under a minute, and that's about it. Yeah, I mean, where it is true is that it's not about going fast; it's about doing things easily. So the person who can run the fastest with the greatest ease is the person who's going to do, or cycle or swim the fastest with the greatest ease is the person who does well. And I think that's an important thing to consider with training, is that you're not necessarily the person who's the fastest; it's the person who does it the easiest. And that's the person who will generally do well.
Well, I think that's another thing that I found interesting as I was reading and starting to use like heart rate training, is like to keep your heart rate down and get faster, you need to increase that efficiency and economy. And that can be sort of just being aware of maybe dropping your shoulders or adjusting your breathing patterns.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, is there little like tips in that realm that you've discovered over the years that have sort of helped with that?
Yeah, I mean, always being as relaxed as possible is really important. I mean, running gaits, unfortunately, it's really hard to change with athletes. Often we have a running gait running gaits analysis at our university, and people come in and get analyzed. And one is, you can spot deficiencies in technique that are really hard to change, and when you do change them, they'll get injured from it. So it's not that easy, but there's definitely things about relaxation and just being mindful of where your foot's placing. I always try and think about relaxing my jaw and my mouth a little bit, which kind of transcends all the way down the body when I'm running, at least. And then also even on the bike, just trying to keep yourself relaxed. And there's loads of things like not overstriding, making sure you're landing under your center of support, really help. I mean, I'm fortunate that my running economy is naturally pretty good. So, not something that I've had to really worry about. But yeah, I mean, there are some, which is good for racing in the heat, because when it comes to efficiency. If you're more efficient, generally you're actually better in the heat. So you could have two people who had say that they have very similar times over a marathon, but if one's doing so, one's got a say a VO2 max of 65 and one's got a VO2 max of 75, and the reason they're the same is because the person who's with the 65 VO2 max is a much more efficient and economical in the heat. You can guarantee that that person will wipe up the person who's got the high VO2 max, because metabolic heat therefore is much higher in the person with the higher VO2 max. And in the end of it, it's when it comes to getting hot, it's metabolic heat production that's the main thing to why people get too hot, which is why bigger athletes, bigger engines, bigger muscle masses, bigger power outputs will generally not go as well in the heat.
Right. When it comes to like efficiency on the bike and avoiding injury there, it seems like getting measured and fitted can be pretty crucial and something that a lot of people maybe never do. I wonder, like, what is your insight into that?
Yeah, I think, you make the most important thing the most important thing, and depends on where you're at in your career, right? In terms of triathlon or cycling, you like, if you're very new to the sport, you don't necessarily have to be getting wind tunnel tested. You just make, if you can improve your training and have a basically comfortable bike position, that's the first thing you can focus on. But as you progress, then aerodynamics and real wind tunnel testing becomes a major thing. And also the incremental gains become so small. So with a pro athlete, for me to increase their threshold power by 10 watts, it could be like 2 years of training, right? Because that's actually a lot in that time, in that end of professionalism.
Yeah.
But then aerodynamics is probably easier for me to achieve. So I could improve someone by 10 watts, making them reduce their power output by 10 watts at a given speed, just through tweaking a few things with the bike, with the position, with the helmet. But with an age group or someone who's new to the sport, you could improve them by 50 watts in about 3 months.
Right.
So that's the difference. So it's kind of, it becomes more important as the faster you get, and also aerodynamics is more important anyway. The faster you're going, if you're going pretty slow, then it has less of an effect anyway. So
right. Yeah, I think that time perspective is again like so interesting to me. The idea of improving 10 watts in 2 years, or even when you were talking about your race in 2015, and then like a 3-year project to go back to Kona and race again and see how much you could improve on that. It's hard for me and maybe other people to imagine like working towards a race 3 years from now. It feels like 7 months from now feels like a far time away. But especially in this sport, it feels like that's the sort of time commitment and longevity and perspective you need to have.
Yeah, for sure. And I think and it was supposed to be 2 years and it ended up being 3, just because we had a little girl born in 2017. So it didn't happen in that year. But yeah, it's probably for the better, really. It worked well. So, but yeah, like I say, like you can't, like these things don't happen overnight. You've got to, I think long-term perspective is always a good thing.
Mhm. I'm curious to know about like how, this is kind of a bit left field, but like having a child, becoming a father, how did that sort of change your perspective on things?
Well, I think that one of the main things it changed my perspective on is, life is just a lot less selfish when you've got, I've got 2 now. I've got like a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and they're everything. They're my motivation for everything, really, work, business, and even doing. I want to show them how it is important to be fit and healthy. Like even the other day, I said, my little girl says, she says, "Daddy, are you going to be here in the morning?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'll be here. I'm going swimming, but I'll be back by the time you wake up." And she says to me, "Oh, that's good, because it's kind to look after yourself." That's what she said to me.
Yeah, that's great.
And then it's like, yeah, it says, yeah, it's kind to look after yourself. So, and that, I think, that's the main thing, is that you suddenly you just have to, you're just not as selfish with your time anymore. And but I think, yeah, most of the biggest accomplishment I've ever had, I think, is having the two kids. I mean, and also I had a very supportive wife who supported me through that whole year. I mean, Bella was born in 2015, and then all that year I trained for Kona, and she was just amazing, because we made that commitment together that I was gonna do that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's amazing.
Like the sport can be, time consuming and serious, and, you're in the lab studying all this stuff. There can be so much information that it can be overwhelming or dense in a way. Does having the kids, like, does that help bring a lightness to things into life as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Um, I mean, no matter how bad your day is, they always bring perspective into it, right? They're always, yeah. Yeah. It's just like there's ups and downs, right? They're completely irrational. Like my son this morning is a prime example. He absolutely lost it because I wouldn't let him eat the eggshell. Like he had like he had like egg soldiers, and he started putting the whole egg and the shell in his mouth, and I'm trying to get it out, and then he's getting really annoyed with me for not letting him eat the eggshell. So it's, there's and things like that. It's like, it's things. But yeah, it's all about perspective. It's good. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I say though, they're definitely a major motivator for me in terms of what business and life, because you want to provide and you want to make sure that they have the things that they need, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, it's good.
So, looking out into sort of the rest of the year, with Endure IQ and anything else that's going on, is there anything that you're sort of excited coming up, or extensions to the programs you're offering, anything like that?
Yeah, well, we've got our Enjoy IQ squad, which is like a training membership.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a subscription-based training squad where people can join and have. We have like Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere rolling plans with a variety of 70.3 plans, training phases, weekly webinars, and weekly Zwift rides. And it's a real community for people to join and get some quality training and quality advice at the same time. So there's that side of things. We're also building another course, which is LDT 104 now, and that's all around athlete monitoring. So it includes a lot of the things that we talked about today. So we've got modules on just basically training load and how to think about that. We've got some ones that are specifically at swimming, cycling, and running, some basic blood monitoring, whether it's CG, like continuous blood glucose monitoring, lactate, and ketones, and heart rate or heart variability, heart rate recovery, submaximal heart rate in general. So yeah, we're building that out at the moment, and then after that, the next big thing is we will be building out our coaching program. So we have a lot of requests from coaches to become Endure IQ accredited coaches. So we're going to be building that out, which will include it's more of an ongoing thing where you can be an accredited coach and get access to all of our courses, but also, monthly like workshops and monthly access to like science reviews, really, because coaches are so busy, they just don't have the chance to keep on top of what's current and what's new. So yeah, that's what we're building out as well.
Yeah, that sounds cool. You mentioned like doing the Zwift rides. Somebody who's spent a lot of time on the bike over the years, feels like that's kind of blown up in the last year with everyone staying at home more often. How do you find the sort of digital riding landscape?
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. That was that was actually the first thing that springs to mind, and it somehow went out of my head when you asked me what's one of the main things that changed when I had kids. And my sense of mortality 100% had a massive shift. Like
Mm.
I will, I only ride my bike out on the road once a week now, and often that's actually mountain biking, not on roads, because I just, it's just quite dangerous, and Auckland's not the best for cycling outside anyway. So, but that's where the benefit of Zwift came in. I'm a level 45 Zwifter. I actually am the Zwift Triathlon Academy coach as well, so I do a bit of work with them. Great company, great product. Yeah, so I love spending a bit of time in Whitopia. So if anyone's interested who's listening to this, we have, at the moment, it's at 7:30 a.m. on a Thursday, New Zealand time. We have our weekly Zwift Enduro IQ session. So that's actually open to anyone, but it's pulled from our training squad, but the session anybody can do. So yeah, we might change it to a better time for Europe and the States, but we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled. You can see it all in if you go into the Zwift companion app, if anyone who uses Zwift, you can find it in there. Not Google, search for Enduro IQ.
Yeah. Oh, I mentioned I just got a trainer like last week, and I've got a couple rides in, so I'm definitely going to be checking out the Zwift landscape, I think, sooner than later.
Yeah, it'll change your life. You won't regret it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like that's probably a great spot to leave it for today. Thanks again so much for your time and for sharing everything.
No, thanks for having me. Yeah, good chatting.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Take care. I'm just going to hit end over here. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your time again and for sharing all your insights and wisdom.
All good. Cool. So when will this come out? Will you just let me know and I'll put it in our newsletter and stuff?
Yeah, that'd be great. Probably like within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. Cool, man. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, good meeting you, and we'll see you online, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Bye bye.
Take care.